Okay, folks, let's do this thing. Um, so we are in the middle of our section of taxes and government spending. We just did government revenue, federal government revenue, and now let's find out where they spend our money. Right? We know that the government takes close to $3.9 trillion a year from us in taxes. What do they do with it? What do you do with my money, Uncle Sam? Let's find out. And all of this stuff is public information, as well it should be. It's our tax money. We should know where it goes. Each year, the federal government has close to $4 trillion a year to spend. And when you see that number, something you might say is, well, it makes me feel a little better about our $28 trillion deficit, knowing that that's really only 7 years of taxes coming in. And when you look at GDP, our GDP is up above $20 trillion. So this is kind of how we justify having such a huge debt. We'll do debt next. Half of that, or more than half of that, goes to what's called mandatory spending, and we'll look at mandatory spending. And these are bills or promises the government has already made. The other half, or probably less than half, is discretionary spending. This is money that the government can choose where it goes. And the only way to change mandatory spending is to change the actual government programs. Our mandatory spending programs are things like Social Security, that's the big one. Medicare, Medicaid, those are the next two big ones. And then you can kind of combine the rest of these programs all into something called like income, security, things like unemployment insurance, disability insurance if you get hurt at work, EBT is food stamps. Section 8 housing is lower, is like coupons. It's like I don't know, I've heard someone tell me before, $1,000 a month that you can use towards your rent if you're very low income. Free lunches for students at school, which during the coronavirus, everyone's getting free lunches. My daughter comes home with a big old bag of lunch every day. And then they actually give her breakfast and dinner. So my whole fridge is being clogged up by these ridiculously huge bags. Thank you, LAUSD, but take it easy. Discretionary, though, programs are where the cuts can be made much more easily. I mean, you have to go in, right, and make dramatic changes to Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid in order to cut the mandatory spending programs. But discretionary spending programs are much, much easier to change. You can just change it with the signing of a pen. Although we're going to discuss that military spending isn't that easy to cut. There's already contracts in place. That military, they're pretty smart about making sure they get paid. Let's then take a look, and I found a really fun website. And here we're going to go, let's start here. Well, we know that the federal government took in about $1.7 trillion in taxes in 2018, about another 2.1 trillion, 1.7 trillion in individual income tax, 1.2 trillion in payroll taxes, about 205 billion, small sliver, in corporate taxes, and we also know that they borrowed about 800 billion. Okay, this was the year, 2 years before the coronavirus hit, and we know we're in an emergency situation. We're borrowing money like a bunch of wild people to get out of this emergency. We're hoping our government is wise enough, as they've been in the past, to dial back on their spending after the emergency is over. We had a 2008 Great Recession emergency where they borrowed at an incredible pace, and wars in the past have also required a lot of borrowing, but usually the plan is to dial back on your borrowing after the emergency is over. So where do they spend our money? Well, this first one, we're going to say there's some mandatory spending, and then there's discretionary spending. These will be discretionary spending categories. right here, these little small guys, and these big ones are mandatory. Like you got to pay these. And the biggest of all is Social Security, money for old people. In this country, you get Social Security taken out of every paycheck. And when the deal is that when you turn 65, the government's going to send you a paycheck for the rest of your life. My grandfather, my dad, my mom, well, my mom still works. Even though she's old enough to get it, she hasn't yet gotten it. She wants to put more in. You can take it at 68. She's waiting. So my grandfather and my dad, though, they're getting Social Security. Every month they get a paycheck. Thanks, government. Thank you. They say. Medicare is health insurance for old people. My grandfather, my dad, and my mom are all on Medicare. They get free health insurance. In fact, interesting fun fact, my dad gets Kaiser through Medicare. So they take the Medicare money and they give it to a private company called Kaiser. Also my insurance, thank you LAUSD. I had some choices. I chose Kaiser. But he also gets like 24-hour fitness. Did you know that? That part of Medicare gives you a gym plan. You can go to the gym, which makes sense. You know, one of the wisest things I ever heard about healthcare is that healthcare, in fact, is your diet and your exercise. The hospital is sick care. Think about that one for a second. And then Medicaid is health insurance for low-income people. So, and then this right here is the interest on our debt. And the big fear, folks, is that if we keep borrowing, that the interest in our debt, like we got to pay that. That's paying the minimum on the credit card, okay? But if this keeps growing, then we're not going to have money for the other stuff, okay? For the discretionary spending. And these are also, this is what we call income security. This is things, and you can see it over here. It's like in the little caption, it says things like veterans who we promise stuff to, and good, right? Thank you for protecting us, veterans. And then programs like food stamps, Section 8 housing, and all of the programs that I listed before, free lunches for children. But this is mandatory also. So really we're looking at about 60% plus of our budget, mandatory spending. No choice, got to spend that money. These are promises we made. It didn't used to be so big. It keeps getting bigger. And this discretionary spending keeps getting smaller. And the largest part of our discretionary budget is the military. We spend $600 billion a year on our military. And it eats up more than half or almost half of our discretionary spending. The other half goes to a bunch of other things. Let's look at it. Quickly, we know that here are the Clinton years of saving, but we've been borrowing dramatically since around 1981. We see, this huge jump. We're borrowing like crazy people. You can see a lot of the debt is held by the public. Okay, where are my discretionary spending categories? And we have $1.3 trillion to spend. About $600 billion goes to defense. Where else is the money going? Folks, this is what I'm trying to figure out here. Is this it? Okay, so again, let's take a closer look. Well, this was 2015. You can see we had a larger percentage going to the military back then. The government, just to run things, jobs, government jobs. This isn't just like money we're throwing into a black hole. No, these are people. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who work for the government who do stuff, right? My job is at the EPA. I help protect the environment. I check and make sure that people aren't polluting. Or Dr. Fauci, right? He works for the health, whatever it is. And all those people, the scientists, the doctors, the EPA, everyone, this is their salary, okay? Education department. A lot of that goes to free school lunches, but they also give money to schools in low-income areas to try and help out those schools. Veterans, housing, and community, we give money to help out houses. International affairs, this is our diplomacy. energy and the environment. Okay, so these people, this is where our EPA is. This is where, by the way, the Department of Energy is in charge of nuclear weapons. That's kind of a, right? I wouldn't have guessed. I thought the military would be in charge of nuclear weapons. Okay, science, NASA is a big part of that. I think NASA is 1% of our budget, so then that's almost half of our science bill. Money well spent. Many people would agree. Other people say no, it's not. I don't know. What do you think? And this is not Social Security, right? These are like the programs, the government agencies that run these programs. It's not. There's transportation, like freeways that the government chips in and they help out. Hey, here's a little money for your freeways or for your subway system, right? Food and agriculture, let's make sure that our food is safe and that kind of thing, right? FDA, thank you, FDA. I will spend, a small percentage of my tax dollars to make sure I'm eating safe meat. If you don't agree, just go ahead and read Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle. I think it might change your mind quickly. Okay, so really that's it, right? Where does our money go, right? Well, we'll go back real quickly and we're going to take a second look at it. We already talked about it. Our money goes to grandma and grandpa. Our money goes mostly to old people who aren't working anymore, to retirees, to grandma and grandpa, or my dad, right? My dad is a grandpa. My mom's a grandma. I have kids, so do my brother and sister. Yeah, that's the biggest chunk. It goes to Social Security and Medicare. Look at that. That's old people right there. We're talking about a third of every penny that the government gets, including borrows, goes to old people. Defense goes to the military. And look, we need to be defended. Some people think that we should cut here, that this is an over-bloated category, that we don't need to keep buying. One of the things that happens, folks, is that every year we have these contracts with people who make tanks and airplanes and bombs and this and that. And every year it goes up by like 2%, which isn't a lot. But the question is, do we still need to keep buying so many tanks? Like, we've been doing this for a lot of years. And I don't know about you, but I haven't seen our tanks face another line of tanks in battle ever. Maybe I think actually it's not true. In the Persian Gulf War in 1991, there was a moment where we lined up against the Iraqi tanks and we demolished them. They had old tanks. But that was 30 years ago. What are we doing with these tanks? All these planes? Yeah, I mean, we do use planes more and more, and bombs and missiles. And I mean, military is important. Maybe there is a bit that could be cut. Something that's interesting about the military is that they locate their factories that make military stuff, the military industrial complex, in every state. So no one really wants to cut the military. None of the lawmakers want to cut the military because it would affect all of them. Because every lawmaker, state, would have a small cut. And those are just jobs, folks. I mean, when I say, oh, we don't want to have, maybe we don't need so many tanks. Yeah, but someone's getting paid to make those tanks, right? And they're taking that money home. And we remember the circular flow of the economy. They're spending that money in our cities and at Ralph's, and Ralph's is hiring, kids, and Ralph's is hiring people, and then those people are going to Taco Bell. Taco Bell is hiring high school kids. And that money, then the high school kids get that money and they go to the movies, and then the movies hire people, and then the mall, and then the Laker games. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to make cuts. It hurts the whole community. You're never going to touch the interest on the debt. This is going to keep getting bigger unless we stop borrowing. Please, government, stop borrowing so much. So a third of it goes to old people. Defense is, what is that? That's about 15%. Don't know how much we can cut there. We can't touch this 10%. That's just, or 9%. That's just straight out interest on the debt. And then you have low income people, which are about, I don't know what you're going to call that, a little less than a quarter of our budget. And they're the group that gets targeted the most, right? This is the one that people complain about. Oh, stop giving money to the poor. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's what you think. You have the right to think that way. You can vote for the people who agree with you. The other side of that coin, though, is that I like my neighbors to be happy. You know, I like my neighbors to be well fed. I like my community to be happy. I like my community to be well fed. And yeah, it's because I'm a kind hearted man. But it's also because I'm logical. And I know that if I was hungry, let me put it to you like this, if my kids were hungry, I'd feed them, find a way to feed them. And I'd do whatever it took. So when we're giving free lunches to school kids, you're not going to hear me complaining. I want my neighbors' kids to be fed. I want my neighbors to be happy. So then what does that mean? Well, we have the other, right? The non-defense. This is what we said, that's part of it there. Then this is a teeny sliver now, non-defense discretionary spending. And we looked at this, right? We said, well, this is this. All of this right here is this teeny little bit. And even if you were to cut this, which is 15% of our budget, that's still not how much we borrowed. So you can cut everything else the federal government does, NASA, and national parks, and the EPA, and the FDA, Clean Food and Drugs, and you're still not going to stop borrowing. The only way to stop borrowing is to cut the big guys, to cut grandma, to cut the poor, or to cut the military. Those are tough cuts. Or if you want to stop borrowing, you raise taxes. And that's no fun either. No one likes to pay more in taxes. It's easy to say tax the rich because they're the 1%, but they also are people who create jobs. These are complicated issues. And I'm not going to run around pretending to have the answers. I personally know which direction I vote, right? And where I think we should be edging, because I think instead of trying to make huge cuts, we should maybe just do little trims around a lot of the corners, right? One idea, Social Security, is to stop having it be regressive tax, stop taxing it at $127,000. If we get rid of that, they say Social Security would last for the next 100 years. And the way it is, I don't know. Maybe it'll be there for me, but it doesn't look like it'll be there 100% for you. I've heard them say they'll cut it to 70%. You pay into it for the next 50 years. Maybe we should raise that cap or eliminate it completely. Maybe we should, but now that's a tax raise on the rich, right? People who make over $127,000 a year. Maybe we should raise Medicare, Medicaid to help pay for those programs. Those things are losing money every year. Maybe we should do some of the ideas. Our current president's got a bunch of ideas. A lot of them involve taxing the rich or not letting corporations pay $0 taxes or taxing investments the same way that we tax regular people. But then what he keeps saying is, then I'm going to spend it. But I don't ever hear anyone say, let's stop borrowing. But the young people are the ones who should be saying that the loudest, because they'll be the one who's paying it back. It's the old people who aren't going to pay it back because they're retired, who don't ever talk about it because they're the ones in power, and the young people who are going to have to pay it back don't vote